quarterback. It's the most important position in sports, and the most controversial to rank. For every fan who says Brady is the GOAT, there's another yelling about Montana, Manning, or Marino. But what actually makes a quarterback great? Today we're cutting through the hype, the nostalgia, and the Twitter debates to settle it once and for all. These are the 10 greatest quarterbacks in NFL history, based on what they actually did on the field. Coming in at the number 10 spot is none other than Dan Marino. Let's get one thing out of the way right now. Dan Marino never won a Super Bowl. That's the first thing critics bring up. And yeah, if you're just stacking rings, he doesn't make the list. But if you're talking pure quarterbacking, arm talent, mechanics, field vision, swagger, then Dan Marino is not just top 10. He might be the most naturally gifted passer the NFL has ever seen. Drafted in 1983, famously the last quarterback taken in that loaded class, Marino walked into the NFL and started lighting it on fire. In just his second season, he threw for 5,084 yards and an unheard of 48 touchdowns. In an era where most teams were still running the ball 30 times a game, Marino was playing like it was 2020. He didn't just break records, he blew them up, and he did it with style. His release was lightning quick, almost impossible to sack. His pocket awareness was elite, and his deep ball, effortless. He made 40-yard lasers look like checkdowns. Marino could beat you from the pocket, beat you with anticipation, beat you with sheer confidence. He didn't need a strong run game. He didn't need a top 5 defense. He was the offense. Every time he stepped on the field, he gave the Dolphins a shot. And let's not ignore longevity. Marino played 17 seasons, threw for over 61,000 yards, and tossed 420 career touchdowns in an era that didn't inflate stats like today's game does. He made 9 Pro Bowls, won an MVP, and dragged some very average Dolphins teams to the playoffs again and again. So yeah, no ring. But ask any cornerback from the 80s and 90s who they didn't want to see. It was Marino. He was cold-blooded. He was fearless. He was the prototype for every pocket passer who came after him. In the conversation for greatest QB of all time, Dan Marino is the guy who proved you don't need rings to be legendary. You just the ball in your hands and 60 minutes on the clock. At number 9 is everyone's favorite gunslinger that loves to steal from welfare recipients, Brett Farve. If you built a quarterback out of duct tape, rocket fuel, and pure adrenaline, you'd get Brett Farve. He wasn't the most polished, he wasn't the most careful, but he was the most Brett Farve, and that alone earns him a spot on this list. Farve was the ultimate gunslinger. The man threw the football like he was trying to hurt it. He had zero fear, short memory, and an Iron Man streak that'll probably never be broken. 297 consecutive starts at quarterback. That's not just impressive, that's impossible. Every Sunday, rain or shine, broken thumb or bruised ribs, Farve suited up and let it rip. Statistically, the guy was a monster. Over 71,000 passing yards, 508 touchdowns, 3 straight MVPs from 1995 to 1997, and a Super Bowl ring in 1996 that helped put Green Bay back on the football map after decades of irrelevance. He made 11 Pro Bowls, led the league in passing yards twice, and for a good decade, there was no quarterback more entertaining or more terrifying to face. But here's the full Brett Favre experience. He'd throw an absolute dime between 3 defenders, and then try the same throw again and get picked off. He finished his career with 336 interceptions, the most in NFL history. But honestly, that's just part of the charm. He played like a kid in a backyard game, with reckless confidence, incredible improvisation, and a belief that every play could be a touchdown. And somehow, even in his late 30s, he was still doing it. That 2009 season with the Vikings at age 40, arguably the best of his career. Over 4,200 yards, 33 touchdowns, and just 7 picks. He took that team to the NFC Championship game to ever do it. Number 8 is a shaman, a true psychedelic visionary who has hurt his legacy quite a bit over the last few years. Aaron Rodgers is the most surgically precise quarterback the game has ever seen. If Favre was chaos, Rodgers was control. Ice in his veins, the flick of a wrist, and boom, 60-yard bomb right on the money. He didn't just throw passes, he painted them. Rodgers took over in 2008 after a messy, drama-filled divorce with Brett Favre, and immediately made it clear that Green Bay wasn't stepping back, they were stepping up. In 2010, he led the Packers to a Super Bowl win, torched the Steelers for 304 yards and 3 touchdowns, and was named Super Bowl MVP. It wasn't just a win, it was a warning. From that point forward, Rodgers was consistently elite. He has over 59,000 passing yards, 475 plus touchdowns, and the lowest interception rate in NFL history. The man has 5 seasons with over 35 touchdown passes and fewer than 10 picks. That's not normal, that's cyborg efficiency. He's also a 4-time MVP, including back-to-back awards in 2020 and 2021 in his late 30s. He led the league in passer rating 4 times, and for over a decade made the Packers a perennial contender, even when the roster around him wasn't doing him any favors. His strengths: arm talent, mechanics, mobility, IQ, and the ability to make impossible throws look routine. You want Hail Marys? He's the king. Need a 4th and 18th miracle? He's got it. Need a game-winning drive with 30 seconds and no timeouts? Done. But Rodgers' career hasn't been without flaws. Despite all the talent and stats, he's only been to 1 Super Bowl. Some of that's on his defenses, some on coaching, and some, yeah, on Rodgers himself. He's had playoff moments where things just fell flat, and the last few years in Green Bay were more headlines than highlight reels. Still, you can't argue the resume. 4 MVPs, a Super Bowl, over a decade of surgical dominance, and the most aesthetically perfect spiral the sport has ever seen. Lucky number 7 goes to a player who ironically wore that number for most of his career, John Elway. John Elway was the prototype before we knew we needed one. 6 feet 3 inches, rocket arm, mobile enough to outrun linebackers, and clutch in a way that made defensive coordinators lose sleep. For most of his career, Elway didn't just carry the Denver Broncos, he dragged them, kicking and screaming, into contention year after year. He played 16 seasons and made 5 Super Bowl appearances, winning the last 2. But what really makes Elway's story so unique is the arc of his career. Early on, he had the tools, but not the help. His first 3 Super Bowls were blowout losses, and the knock on Elway was that he just couldn't win the big one. But those losses weren't on him. He was often the only elite player on those teams, carrying average rosters to the promised land with pure arm talent and grit. Then came the late career renaissance, with a loaded roster, a dominant run game behind Terrell Davis, and finally a complete team around him. Elway won back-to-back Super Bowls in 1997 and 1998, retiring as a champion and Super Bowl MVP. He walked off the field with a ring on each hand and a horse on his helmet. Storybook ending. Stat-wise, Elway finished with over 51,000 passing yards, 300 touchdowns, 9 Pro Bowls, and more comebacks than anyone not named Brady. He rushed for over 3,400 yards and 33 touchdowns, showing off underrated mobility that made him dangerous even when things broke down. He wasn't always the flashiest. His mechanics weren't always perfect, but when the game was on the line, you wanted number 7 in the huddle. He could launch a 60-yard bomb across his body in a blizzard and still hit his guy in stride. Elway wasn't just great, he was tough, clutch, and evolved as his career progressed. He went from stat stuffer to winner, from talented but flawed to complete and decorated. That transformation, paired with his longevity and 5 Super Bowl trips, makes him an easy top 10 and a solid number 7 all time. We're gonna take a small step back in time for the 6th person on this list, to someone who really redefined what a quarterback even is, and Johnny Unitas is the man who started it all. He wasn't just great for his era, he defined the position. When people say he was doing it before anyone else, they're talking about Unitas. Back in the 1950s and 60s, quarterbacks weren't asked to do much. Run the ball, throw a few times, don't mess it up. But Unitas, he came in with swagger, smarts, and a right arm that changed the league. He made the forward pass a weapon, not a last resort. He called his own plays in the huddle, ran 2-minute drills before they had names for them, and had this quiet, relentless confidence that just broke teams. Over 18 seasons, mostly with the Baltimore Colts, Unitas threw for over 40,000 yards, 290 touchdowns, won 3 MVPs, and made 10 Pro Bowls. He led the Colts to 4 championship appearances, winning 3, including the 1958 NFL Championship, often called the greatest game ever played. That game, which went into sudden death over time, helped launch the NFL into the national spotlight. And Unitas, he was the star. Cool, calm, surgical. He led the game-winning drive and became a legend overnight. He also held the record for most consecutive games with a touchdown pass, 47 straight, a record that stood for over 50 years until Drew Brees finally broke it. Let that sink in. His passing consistency stood the test of half a century. In a leather helmet era, against defenses that were were allowed to do just about anything. Was his arm as strong as Elway's? Was he as fast as Lamar or Mahomes? Absolutely not, but what Unitas had was leadership, accuracy, toughness, and an understanding of the game that was decades ahead of his time. He was football's first great field general, and the template for every elite pocket passer that came after. Johnny Unitas isn't just on this list because he was great for his era. He's on it because he paved the way for every quarterback who followed. Number 6 all time, and the reason quarterbacking became an art form. Dead in the middle of the list is someone I think I might get a little flack for, but I still think deserves a spot purely for his winning ability. Terry Bradshaw was built for big moments. You can argue mechanics, you can debate stats, but when it comes to rings, leadership, and legacy, Bradshaw's resume hits hard. He led the Pittsburgh Steelers to 4 Super Bowl wins in 6 years, something no QB had ever done before, and very few have done since. He wasn't just part of a dynasty, he quarterbacked it. He came into the league in 1970 as the #1 overall pick, and for a while, things were rocky. Bradshaw threw a lot of interceptions early in his career, and critics questioned his decision-making. But once the Steelers started to click, once the steel curtain defense and weapons like Lynn Swann and John Stallworth came together, Bradshaw flipped the switch. He was named Super Bowl MVP twice, tossed 9 touchdown passes in those 4 Super Bowl appearances, and played some of his best football when it mattered most. His performance in Super Bowl 13 against the Cowboys is the stuff of legend. 318 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 0 fear in the face of an elite defense. And let's not forget, he played in an era where passing the ball was way harder than it is now. Defensive backs could mug receivers. Pass protection rules were looser, yet Bradshaw still threw for over 27,000 yards, 212 touchdowns, won league MVP in 1978, and earned his spot in the Hall of Fame in 1989. Bradshaw wasn't about stats. He was about winning. He played through injuries, took monster hits, and still came through when it counted. He had a big arm, a bigger personality, and the ultimate respect of his teammates. He was the alpha in a locker room full of alphas, and when the pressure was highest, Bradshaw delivered. So yeah, his numbers won't jump off the page in today's game, but 4 rings, 2 Super Bowl MVPs, and a legacy as the leader of one of the greatest dynasties ever. That puts him right here at number 5 all time. This next player is probably the only player who has an argument to eventually upset the list entirely and take the top spot. Patrick Mahomes isn't just great, he's generational. The kind of quarterback who feels like he was built in a lab, then dropped into the NFL with cheat codes turned on. From the moment he became the Chiefs starter in 2018, he didn't just meet expectations, he rewrote them. With a cannon for an arm, off-the-charts football IQ, and the improvisational instincts of a streetball point guard, Mahomes immediately took the league by storm. In his first year as a starter, he threw for over 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns, won league MVP, and announced to the world that this was his league now, and he's done nothing but back it up since. He already has 3 Super Bowl rings, 3 Super Bowl MVPs, and 2 regular season MVPs, all by the age of 28. He's led the Chiefs to 6 straight AFC Championship appearances, 5 at home, and has never had a season as a starter where he didn't at least make it to the conference title game. That's not just dominance, that's dynasty level consistency. And what makes it scarier is how he adapts. He started as the deep ball king with Tyreek Hill, then evolved into a surgical short game assassin after Hill left, and still won a Super Bowl with no true #1 receiver, even when things go wrong. Injuries, new receivers, shaky O-lines, Mahomes finds a way. He won Super Bowl 57 on a bad ankle, carving up the Eagles' top 5 defense with ease. He's made legendary playoff comebacks, converted the impossible in crunch time, and pulled off throws that defy physics. The no looks, the across his body bombs, the sidearm lasers. He makes them look routine. People might say it's too early to put him this high, but if Patrick Mahomes retired tomorrow, he's a lock for the Hall of Fame. He already has a resume that most legends can only dream of, and he's not even close to done. Mahomes is the future of the quarterback position, and somehow he's already built one of the greatest legacies in NFL history. That's why he lands at number 4 all time, and let's be honest, he's still climbing. At number 3 is someone who I actually think most of the league can agree was one of the most talented passers of all time. No quarterback in NFL history ever controlled a game like Peyton Manning. He didn't just read defenses, he dissected them. Pre-snap, he was a conductor orchestrating chaos, changing protections, audibling routes, yelling Omaha at the line of scrimmage. Every defender on the field knew what was coming, and they still couldn't stop it. From the moment he entered the league as the first overall pick in 1998, Manning was something different. A perfectionist, a machine, a student of the game who became its professor. Statistically, he was a monster. Manning threw for over 71,000 yards and 539 touchdowns, held the all-time TD record at one point, and still owns the record for most touchdown passes in a single season with 55 in 2013. He won 5 MVPs, the most in league history, and made 14 Pro Bowls. Every team he touched instantly became a contender. He carried the Colts to consistent playoff appearances and finally broke through with a Super Bowl win in 2006. Then, after a neck injury that almost ended his career, he reinvented himself in Denver, won another MVP, made 2 more Super Bowls, and walked off into the sunset as a 2-time champion. But Peyton's greatness wasn't just in the numbers or the wins. It was in the way he elevated everyone around him. He turned decent receivers into Pro Bowlers, made offensive lines look better than they were, and could squeeze every last drop of production out of a drive just with timing, precision, and film study. The term coach on the field gets thrown around a lot, but Manning practically was the offensive coordinator. He didn't just run plays, he ran offenses. Of course, there were some playoff letdowns. His postseason record isn't spotless, and for a guy with 5 MVPs, only 2 rings might feel underwhelming. But let's be honest, if rings were the only measure, Trent Dilfer would be ahead of Dan Marino. Peyton Manning changed how the position is played. He brought surgical dominance to a position that had long been built on raw talent. He wasn't just a quarterback, he was a system, he was a game plan, and he was one of the smartest, most accurate, and most influential players in football history. Number 3 all time, one of the greatest minds to ever touch a football, and the prototype for quarterback excellence. Before Tom Brady stacked rings like poker chips, Joe Montana was the gold standard. The guy who never lost a Super Bowl. The one who made pressure look boring. He was calm, accurate, and ice cold in the biggest moments. And that's why he lands at number 2 all time on this list. Montana won 4 Super Bowls with the San Francisco 49ers and was named Super Bowl MVP 3 times. He never threw a single interception in those games. Let that sink in. 4 rings, 11 touchdowns, 0 picks. He didn't just show up in the playoffs, he owned them. That iconic game-winning drive in Super Bowl 23, capped off by a laser to John Taylor with 34 seconds left. That's not a highlight, that's history. But Montana wasn't just a big game guy. He was consistently great year after year. He threw for over 40,000 yards, completed over 63% of his passes in an era where DBs could mug receivers, and won 2 league MVPs. He mastered Bill Walsh's West Coast offense, turning short throws into long gains with precision timing and flawless execution. He didn't have the biggest arm or the flashiest stats, but what he had was unbeatable rhythm, field vision, and leadership. He also elevated everyone around him. Jerry Rice was great, yes, but Joe made him unstoppable. Roger Craig, Dwight Clark, Brent Jones, these guys became household names in part because Montana was the steady heartbeat behind every play. He knew how to win, when to push, and most importantly, when to be perfect. Even late in his career, when he was traded to Kansas City, he still had it. He led the Chiefs to the AFC Championship game and proved that his greatness wasn't tied to just one system or coach. He was a winner through and through. So no, Montana didn't put up the inflated passing numbers you see today, but when the moment called for greatness, he answered every time. He was the first quarterback who felt inevitable, the calm before, during, and after every storm. And for a long time, he was the undisputed greatest of all time. Number 2 all time, 4 rings, 0 drama, and maybe the most clutch quarterback to ever play the game. Before we get into number 1 on our list, I wanted to go over a few quarterbacks who just missed the cut for me personally. Let's start with Steve Young. For a guy who sat on the bench behind Joe Montana for years, he sure made up for lost time. Once Young took over as the 49ers starter, he became one of the most efficient and versatile quarterbacks in NFL history. He led the league in passer rating 6 times, rushed for over 4,000 career yards, and won 2 league MVPs. And in Super Bowl 29, he threw 6 touchdown passes passes, setting a record that still stands. Young was everything you'd want in a modern quarterback: accurate, mobile, fearless. He just didn't have the same longevity as some of the top 10 guys. But at his peak, he was as good as anyone who's ever played. Then there's Drew Brees, the NFL's ultimate underdog turned record breaker. Standing barely 6 feet tall, written off after a shoulder injury, Brees went to New Orleans and redefined what was possible. He threw for over 80,000 yards, retired as the all-time leader in completions and touchdowns, and brought a Super Bowl to a city that needed it more than ever. He was the king of consistency, multiple 5,000-yard seasons, pinpoint accuracy, and surgical control over the offense. The knock, only one ring, and some playoff flameouts late in his career. But Drew Brees was a machine, and his place in quarterback history is cemented. And finally, we've got Bart Starr, the godfather of winning. Starr led the Green Bay Packers to 5 NFL championships, including the first 2 Super Bowls. He didn't put up flashy numbers, but he was a leader, a winner, and the engine behind Vince Lombardi's dynasty. He was named MVP of Super Bowl I and II, finished his career with a remarkable playoff record of 9-1, and remains one of the most respected players in league history. In terms of legacy and leadership, Starr's impact is immeasurable. When you talk about the greatest quarterback of all time, the conversation doesn't start with Tom Brady. It ends with him. No one in NFL history has achieved more, won more, or sustained greatness longer than TB12. He is the final boss of football, the ultimate competitor, and the walking embodiment of prove them wrong. Drafted 199th overall in 2000, Brady wasn't supposed to be anything. He wasn't fast. He wasn't flashy. He was a 6th round pick with a chip on his shoulder and a fire in his chest. And somehow that overlooked kid became the winningest player in NFL history. 7 Super Bowl rings, 5 Super Bowl MVPs, 3 league MVPs, and more playoff wins than most franchises. The numbers are so absurd they barely sound real. 89,000 plus passing yards, 649 touchdowns, and 23 seasons of never letting the league breathe. But Brady's greatness isn't just about numbers, it's about moments. The 28-3 comeback against the Falcons, beating the greatest show on turf as a 24-year-old backup, outdueling Patrick Mahomes in the AFC title game at age 41, winning a Super Bowl with the Buccaneers in a pandemic season after switching teams for the first time in 2 decades. The man didn't just win, he adapted, he evolved, he outlasted every single challenge the league threw at him. He's the only player in history with multiple Hall of Fame careers. His first decade alone was enough to make him a legend, but then he had another one, and then another. His career spanned 3 generations of quarterbacks, and he outplayed all of them. And through it all, he stayed obsessed, relentless, unshakable, a true killer behind a clean-cut smile. Was he perfect? Number, but he was always prepared, always present, always one step ahead. You knew what was coming, and you still couldn't stop him. Tom Brady isn't just the greatest quarterback of all time. He's the greatest winner in NFL history. Number 1 on the list, number 1 in the record books, and number 1 in rings. This isn't up for debate. And there you have it, the 10 greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. Legends, icons, record breakers, and ring collectors. Whether you agree, disagree, or think your favorite got snubbed, one thing's for sure, every name on this list changed the game. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe for more deep dives and all-time rankings, and drop your top 10 quarterbacks in the comments. I want to hear your takes, your arguments, your hot picks. Don't forget to check out the rest of the channel for more NFL content, player breakdowns, and wild football history that'll have you binge watching before you know it. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.